One of the endlessly fascinating things I find with scripture is how it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter when you are, it doesn't matter where you are. The same words can spark all sorts of different reactions from people. Our cultural context, our study of scripture, our historical understanding, all of these influence things. So when I was preparing today to present this part of the double header that we're working with in the fourth chapter of the Gospel of Luke, I was struck by something I'd never been struck by before. I've always taught, this is the passage where a prophet is not welcome in their own home, and I know something about that personally, a little more than I'd like to actually. But it didn't dawn on me until I was reading it again today that Jesus is not dismissed from his hometown until after he doesn't do what they want. It's a bit of subtlety. It's not that they don't want him, it's that he tells them he's not doing it for them, and then they start to react. See, my experience is the hometown just doesn't like to hear what I have to say, even if it's the same thing I said in numerous places. My message hadn't changed. In essence, Jesus hadn't changed either. He just told a group of people who thought they knew him, thought they had a privilege to him, have a right to him, that he was not going to do what they expected him to do. So delving down into the scripture a little bit more, we have a repeat of last week where Jesus reads from the scripture, sits down and says, the message is the promise is fulfilled here in my presence. Or I'm the fulfillment, depending on which version of the Bible you have. All well and good, all culturally not keeping with the program, doing his own thing, kind of Jesusifying what's going on. And then he tells them, physician, heal thyself. Now, just a side note, it's that statement, physician, heal yourself, that historically has made people assume that Luke was a medical person, a doctor. But historians have now decided that can't possibly be the case. He was actually more of a historian. But we have this lingering idea of Luke being a doctor. So we have to just put that aside. That's not something that scholars actually think is accurate anymore. But we have this metaphor now, physician, heal thyself. Doctor, take care of yourself. You do the work. I'm not going to. Now, they've just heard the passage from Isaiah that says about Jubilee. It says about releasing captives. It says about taking care of the vulnerable. And Jubilee, as we talked about last time, is the release of property that has been owned, and that it's every 50 years we're supposed to have this cleansing. Slaves and indentured servants are supposed to be released, so their debts excused. Doesn't matter if that indentured servant or slave has been part of the family now for several generations, paying off debt, or they've just been acquired. They're all released. There's no stopping point and starting point. It's just for everybody has the same experience. So this, even though it's agreed upon theoretically by the community, obviously it's not wanted to be enacted by those who have wealth as much as it wants to be enacted by those who are in poverty or looking for justice. So already we have a divide, because Nazareth, as we understand it, was a small artisanal town close to a large city, and the name escapes me right now. Should have looked it up. Sorry about that. But it was a small community, maybe a couple of hundred people, where the artisans there would go into the large city and work. That's what historians kind of assume is going on. So we have a particular culture in Nazareth where people are working for moneyed folks or working for the government. They tend not to be necessarily dirt farmers or subsistence farmers, but I mean, that would have been mingled in there too. So we've got people with a certain expectation that their crafts ability, their skill, their the art that they perform is regarded and makes them special, because it's not something that can be shared widely. It's something passed down family member to family member, often fathers to sons, but not exclusively. And so we have these people who are already starting with a certain amount of privilege in society, can't wait for Jesus to do there what he's done in other places. And Jesus says, "No, not doing it. Not happening. Not here. Mm-mm." And he says, "Not only does a doctor heal yourself, but a prophet is not welcome." Now, prophets are not people who predict the future. Prophets were teachers. They were sages. They were wise ones that wandered around. They were the ones that called out the powerful, particularly through the history of Israel. They're the ones that called out the oppressors and telling them, you can't do this. This is not acceptable. Long history of calling out the Judean and Israeli kings. Don't do that. Not going to happen. You will be punished for it. And, drawing the parallels between that behavior and what actually did happen when Assyrian and Babylonian captivities happened. So there was a weightiness to it. But Jesus sat there and told them, "Get your own house in order. Don't look to me. Yeah, I came from here." And they even recognized Joseph's son. We know this guy. But he said, you have to do that work. That's essentially what physician heal thyself means. It means you go, you put in the effort, you put in the time. You know what the message is. Don't look to me to tell you anything brand new. You've already heard it. And you know what? If they watched Jesus growing up, it probably wouldn't have been the first time he had delivered the message of get your act together. Be a community that supports each other. Be a healthy place for people to live where the vulnerable know that they're safe. Jesus didn't really change his message a whole lot, so why would we expect that he would have a different message beforehand? They would have heard it. Jesus is not going to make the additional effort for them. He heard in Scripture, read it, sat down, and told them, it's done. I mean, I'm here to make sure that it's fulfilled. And then he lies in with a couple of stories of Elijah and Elisha, some of the greatest prophets in Hebrew history, telling them, when all things were bad, they went to a certain person. They didn't go to everybody, didn't go where they were expected. And this angers the people who expect Jesus to be the good old boy who's going to take care of his own first. I was reading something disturbing this morning that it came out of the States. It came out of the current political, leadership, for a better word. How liberals don't understand that we're supposed to love our family first, then our community, and eventually the world. How backwards. But that's exactly what these people in Nazareth were expecting, that our homegrown takes care of our own. And there is a certain element of it. We certainly want to make things better for our community. And Jesus has never said that's a bad thing. But get beyond that. Get beyond to the bigger picture. Get beyond your comfort and your privilege and your expectations and your tying on to this is our guy. Get away from that. Get beyond that. As Elijah and Elisha, they went to people who were not necessarily the talk of the town, the center of the town, but people who are needing them, people who are vulnerable. And Jesus said that's what's going to continue to happen. And these people, rather than sitting down and listening, saying, wait a minute, what's the messaging here? Got irate. And that's, folks, what privilege does, what power does. Thinking that we have somehow got the inside track, that we're somehow special, that we are the ones alone who should get the benefits of it, especially if we know the guy. They were absolutely incensed. And they took Jesus to the edge of town. It says they were ready to throw him off a cliff. Now, where the cliff is, I don't know. The geography of that area wasn't exactly cliffy, hilly maybe, but not cliffy. But Jesus got away. Jesus kind of walked just through them. And there's nothing in Luke's telling of the story that suggests anything supernatural. Just Jesus moved on and got away from the rabid crowd. Now, how do we bring that into our world? Unfortunately, we're witnessing a society that is collapsing, literally on our borders. We are watching people be torn apart. People who thought, oh, I know the guy. I'm with the guy. Nothing's going to happen to us because we're with the guy. Discovering that in that particular instance, the guy doesn't care. How do we overcome all of that? How do we step above that? How do we not get caught up in connection with someone who thinks is going to protect us, make us special? The hard thing is that Jesus turning and telling people he grew up with that I'm not going to give you a special experience. It's kind of what we have to remember to tell ourselves, especially our in communities, where we're most comfortable, where we exert our power. Jesus' message came first and foremost to the vulnerable. When we're vulnerable, it is so easy to understand the transformative nature of the message Jesus was trying to send. But when we're not vulnerable, when we have the resources, when we have a level of protection from what's going on, we as humans tend to forget our place in that whole cycle, our job in that whole process. We want the easy stuff. We want to be spoon fed, just like those people in Nazareth did. Tell us something good. Tell us something great. Tell us how we can do it easily, so we don't actually have to put the work into it, so that we can just kind of say we've done it and move on. And Jesus said, no, not gonna give you that. That's not something that I'm here to do. The work needs to be done. The Jubilee year has to be realized, how whatever that's going to look like. But helping the vulnerable, freeing the hostages, getting people out of poverty, housing the homeless, feeding the hungry, all of those things, they are our responsibility. It's not like Jesus is going to come in like a superhero or some kind of wonderful CEO and kind of wipe everything clean. That's not the job. The job is ours. Not waiting for someone else to make it right, not coming up with all sorts of reasons why we should get special attention, special privilege, not waiting for us to kind of look to each other and shrug and say, well, not happening to me, so I guess we'll move this one along. In order to be followers of Jesus, we have to really take to heart what it means that the scripture is fulfilled in our presence, that we have to heal ourselves, that is our responsibility to make a difference. This is what it means to live a life of social justice, a life that Luke repeatedly is calling us to this year. Social justice, changing the world, finding justice for our society, not just our group, not just our hometown, not just our economic class or our ethnical group, everybody. When the vulnerable are standing face to face, eye to eye with the privileged, we'll have gotten there. But we're so far away and getting further away all the time. Heal ourselves. Don't wait to get the inside track or the cheat codes, because they're not coming. They don't exist anyway. We just have to do the work. Jesus said his life was the fulfillment, and we're called to live that life. Be the ones who bring healing everywhere we can, any way we can, as often as we can. That is our calling. We can scream and shout all we want, try to throw Jesus away if we want to, but that's not going to get rid of the message that we have to be part of the solution.